Once upon a time, there was a peaceful residential area, a true haven of tranquility where each street was lined with wide, clean avenues, lit by elegant street lamps with subdued lights. The houses, each more imposing than the next, boasted carefully maintained facades, with impeccably mowed lawns and hedges trimmed with almost military precision. The harmoniously colored flower beds gave off a delicate scent, and the air was heavy with that characteristic scent of upscale neighborhoods, a subtle blend of freshly cut grass and artisanal coffee from the spacious kitchens. It was a neighborhood where appearance and social status took precedence over everything else. Here everyone knew their neighbor, not out of sincere friendship, but because it was fashionable to be informed of everything that was happening around you. The residents looked alike: senior executives, successful entrepreneurs, elegant wives with calendars full of social lunches and charity meetings. The children attended the best private schools, and discussions at receptions between neighbors often revolved around the latest real estate investments, luxurious trips, or the academic performance of the offspring. Claire Dubois, a well-groomed woman in her 50s, was a familiar figure in this privileged microcosm. She had lived there for more than 20 years and felt like a queen in her kingdom. Blonde, always dressed with discreet elegance, she rigorously maintained her home, a building with pale blue shutters and a flower garden that she watered every morning. Her daily life was like clockwork: a coffee on the terrace while leafing through her favorite magazine, a morning walk to chat with a few neighbors, then an afternoon punctuated by gardening and small domestic pleasures. But what Claire preferred above all was watching her neighborhood. She knew every house, every owner, every car that parked on a driveway. She knew who was going on vacation, who was entertaining unusual guests, and who dared to break the unspoken rules of this seemingly perfect community. Nothing escaped him. So when one day she saw a moving truck stop in front of the house next door, her instincts kicked in immediately. She watched carefully from her window. A team of movers were busy carrying boxes and elegant furniture into the house. Then she saw him. A man. Black. The intrusion of this stranger into her millimeter-regulated world disturbed Claire much more than she wanted to admit. She stood frozen for a moment, her lips pursed, before placing her cup of tea on the table with a curt gesture. There had never been a black man in their neighborhood. Never. Who was he? Where did he come from? Was he really the owner or just a temporary tenant? She observed him. Tall, well-built, he moved with quiet confidence. He wore an impeccable suit, in a sober gray, which perfectly fitted his athletic figure. His appearance was refined, controlled. He didn't have the hesitant or awkward attitude she expected. He wasn't looking for attention, but something about him commanded respect. And yet, for Claire, that wasn't enough. The man's name was Darius Cole. She learned his name a few days later, overhearing a conversation between two other neighbors who were intrigued by this newcomer. "I think he works in finance or something," one of them suggested. "Really? I heard he was a lawyer. It's strange. He has no wife, no children. He lives alone. A lonely life." It was suspicious. A black man, living alone, in a select neighborhood like theirs. Why? Claire began to observe him more carefully. From her window, she watched his every move. Darius left the house early in the morning, still in his suit, with a leather briefcase in his hand. He came home late, sometimes after dark, and parked his black sedan with calculated precision. He never took the time to greet his neighbors, never participated in any of the small neighborhood parties. Sometimes he received visitors. Men in dark suits, looking serious. They never stayed long, and their exchange seemed formal. Traffickers. Claire bit her lip. What kind of man lived like this, in the shadows? She also noticed another troubling detail. He didn't seem to be tending his garden. If his house remained immaculate, his lawn was slightly longer than those of the other houses in the neighborhood. A lack of interest in established standards?
Little by little, distrust transformed into certainty.
He had no place here. Claire was convinced of this. This man was hiding something, and she was going to prove it. The sky was a deep gray, weighed down by thick clouds that poured a fine, persistent rain over the neighborhood. Streetlights cast diffuse light onto the wet asphalt, creating shimmering reflections on the perfectly manicured sidewalks. The air was fresh, laden with that smell of wet earth and ozone characteristic of rainy nights. Claire, standing near her window, scanned the street with feverish attention. She clutched her half-empty cup of tea between her fingers, but she no longer paid attention to it. His thoughts were entirely absorbed by his neighbor. Darius had just returned. His long black coat, impeccably cut, was slightly damp in the drizzle. He held a leather briefcase tightly in his hand, looking serious and focused. Before crossing the threshold of his door, he scanned the surroundings, as if checking that he was not being observed. This simple gesture made Claire's pulse accelerate. He's hiding something. It was too much. She slammed her cup down on the coffee table and grabbed her phone with a decisive gesture. Her fingers trembled slightly with excitement as she dialed 911. Hello. Yes, I would like to report a suspicious individual in my neighborhood. She took care to adopt a panicked tone, measuring her words precisely to elicit an immediate reaction. Yes, he's black. He often wanders around late at night. I think he's up to something. He entertains shady men. I'm afraid for my safety and that of my neighbors. On the other end of the line, the operator wrote down her information seriously. Claire heard a hint of skepticism in his voice, but she persisted, modulating her breathing to sound genuinely concerned. She knew the codes, knew how to attract the attention of the police. A white woman, alone at home, worried about her safety? It was unstoppable. Very well, ma'am. A patrol is on its way.
A thrill of anticipation ran through Claire.
Finally. She hung up and immediately returned to her window, pushing aside her curtains slightly with a hand trembling with excitement. She didn't have to wait long. Less than 10 minutes later, a police car appeared at the entrance to the neighborhood. Their flashing lights were off, a sign that they were taking the matter seriously but didn't want to attract attention. 2 uniformed police officers got out. One was tall and broad-shouldered, his gear-laden belt rattling lightly as he advanced. His younger teammate had a tense expression, his gaze scanning his surroundings cautiously. From her window, Claire held back a smile. They were finally going to stop him. The knock on the door echoed in the silence of the night, accompanied by the distant rustling of the light rain that was still falling on the neighborhood. Officer DuPont stood straight, his hard gaze fixed on the entrance, while his teammate, Hernandez, took a quick glance around. Behind the curtains of her house, Claire held her breath, her eyes glued to the stage. After a few moments, the door slowly opened, revealing Darius Cole. There he was, imposing and perfectly calm, wearing a crisp white shirt under his long black coat. His dark eyes slid from the police officers' faces to their uniforms, before returning to their tense expressions. A shadow of astonishment briefly crossed his features.
Good evening, agents. May I help you?
Agent DuPont, a man with an angular face and short-cropped hair, spoke sharply. We received a report of suspicious activity at this address. Can you show us your ID? Darius raised an eyebrow. Suspicious activity, he repeated slowly, as if weighing the absurd weight of these words. His gaze hardened slightly. Is this a joke? Agent Hernandez, younger but just as wary, crossed his arms and stepped forward slightly, adopting an authoritative stance. Sir, we asked for your ID. The air between them filled with palpable tension. Claire, still behind her curtain, felt a wave of excitement run through her. They put him under pressure. He's going to lose his cool. But Darius didn't flinch. He sighed lightly, then slowly slipped a hand into his coat. The police instantly tensed up. DuPont instinctively put his hand to his holster, ready to draw. Hernandez took a step to the side, his gaze becoming more piercing. The adrenaline kicked up a notch.
Now is the time.
Claire felt her heart beat faster. They will control him, arrest him, reveal what he is hiding. But what Darius took out of his pocket was no ordinary wallet. It was a badge. A black and gold badge that reflected the porch light. When he turned it to face the police, the embossed letters became visible.
FBI.
A deafening silence fell on the porch.
Special Agent Darius Cole.
His voice had become sharper, colder. He looked at the police with a merciless glint in his eyes.
Federal Bureau of Investigation.
You have just made a monumental error. DuPont and Hernandez exchanged a hasty look. For a second, Claire saw the police officer's confidence waver. Their tense muscles relaxed slightly, as if the ground had just slipped away from under their feet. Hernandez, the first to react, swallowed and stood up awkwardly. FBI, he stammered, casting an incredulous look at his colleague. DuPont remained frozen, his face immediately closing. Do you work for the Bureau? He finally said, his voice less confident. Darius tilted his head slightly, his eyes still locked on those of the two police officers. Exactly. And now I would like to know what justifies your presence here at this time. His voice was calm, but sharp as a blade. DuPont seemed to be searching for an answer, but hesitated. He knew that the slightest mistake could make the situation worse. Finally, it was Hernandez who spoke, his voice slightly less firm than before. We received a report from a concerned neighbor.
A cold smile stretched Darius' lips.
A worried neighbor? He glanced furtively around him, then slowly turned his head towards Claire's house. Inside, hidden behind her curtain, Claire felt a cold shiver run down her spine. He knew it was her. Darius turned his attention to the police officers.
Tell me, agents.
You showed up at my house at night, without a warrant, solely on the basis of an anonymous call reporting suspicious activity? DuPont opened his mouth, but Darius cut him off. And what exactly was this suspicious activity?
Silence.
The police began to understand the extent of their error. Darius took a step forward.
Let me guess.
A black man, alone, in an upscale residential neighborhood, receiving visitors in a suit. The silence of the police was a sufficient response. Darius stared at them for a moment, then shook his head slowly.
You know what?
Stay here. He turned on his heel and briefly disappeared inside. Claire felt panic rising within her. What is he going to do? When he returned, he was holding a cell phone in his hand. He lifted it slightly, revealing a screen displaying an audio recording.
Darius pressed lecture, and Claire's voice echoed through the humid night air.
Yes, he's black. He often wanders around late at night. I think he's up to something. He entertains shady men. I'm afraid for my safety and that of my neighbors. The police officers' faces fell. Hernandez raised a hand to his forehead, realizing the magnitude of the catastrophe. DuPont pursed his lips, visibly furious. But not at Darius. Against himself. Darius slowly put his phone away and fixed them with an icy gaze.
Gentlemen.
You are on the verge of a federal complaint for abusive intervention and racial discrimination. The roar of the engine tore through the silence of the night as a second black car appeared at the end of the street, driving at high speed before suddenly braking in front of Darius's house. The doors opened with a sharp slam. From the car came a man of around 50, dressed in a long dark coat. His piercing gaze instantly passed from the police to Darius. His salt and pepper hair framed a hard face, marked by years of service. But what made Agent DuPont blanch was the badge that he briefly displayed as he advanced.
Agent-in-Chief Robert Manning. FBI.
A heavy silence fell on the scene. Manning's shadow was cast on the soaked asphalt as he stopped inches from DuPont. What are you doing here, DuPont? He growled, his raspy voice laden with implacable authority. DuPont sat up instinctively, tension tightening his shoulders. We received a call, a report. We didn't know, Hernandez stammered, awkwardly trying to justify their presence. Manning looked at him sharply. A racist report, yes, he replied in an icy tone.
Hernandez froze.
DuPont swallowed painfully. The head of the FBI slowly turned his head, his gaze stopping on the house where Claire was still spying, hidden behind her curtain. He didn't need confirmation. He already knew. With an accusing gesture, He pointed his hand directly towards the house. She's the one who called, isn't she? None of the police officers dared to respond. But their silence was already an answer in itself. Manning huffed angrily, running a hand across his forehead as if to channel his fury. Then he turned his attention back to the two agents. DuPont Hernandez, I want a detailed report on this intervention, and an explanation as to why you saw fit to interrupt a federal agent in his home based solely on an unfounded call. His voice was lower now, but even more menacing. Hernandez lowered his head, while DuPont remained frozen, his impassive face poorly masking his discomfort. And believe me, added Manning, if your report doesn't stand up, it's not just disciplinary warnings that await you. The two police officers no longer dared to look up. Claire, for her part, felt panic invade her. She took a step back, trembling, wondering if she could still hide. But it was too late. Manning had already turned to her. Even through the glass, she felt the overwhelming force of his gaze. Then, slowly, as if a sudden movement could make her fate worse, she opened her door. His throat was dry.
Her soft legs.
Manning took a few steps forward, arms crossed, dominating the scene with all his presence. Madam, he began in a measured tone, you have just made a false report to the police. Claire opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Do you know that it is punishable by law? He continued, without taking his eyes off her. She stammered something incomprehensible, her trembling voice lost in the night air. Manning didn't wait for her to come up with an excuse. Expect an official visit.
These words rang out like a verdict.
Claire felt her heart collapse in her chest. Manning gave him no time to implore, to beg, to deny the evidence. He turned to Darius and gave him a curt nod. Sorry about that, Cole. We'll take care of them. Darius, always imperturbable, observed the scene with a neutrality that showed neither anger nor satisfaction. He just nodded. I'm used to it, he murmurs.
It won't be de lastime.
Then, without another glance at Claire, without an ounce of hesitation, he went home and closed the door behind him.
The van echoed through the night like a mare hitting a coffin.
Claire remained frozen on her threshold, breathing short. The police officers returned slowly to their car, their steps heavy, their spirits even heavier. Manning stayed a moment longer, watching Claire with a piercing gaze, as if he wanted her to never forget this moment. Then he turned on his heel and went back to his car. In a few seconds, the neighborhood regained its calm. But for Claire, nothing would ever be the same again. She felt her legs give way beneath her. She clutched the doorframe, panting. That night, she finally understood. The real danger was not his neighbor. These were his own prejudices.